Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome over to our stream today. Really great to have you aboard here. We have so many really interesting comic book previews to touch on today. Plus, we had so many fascinating comic book reviews over on the channel this week. I really think we had a phenomenal second issue, just a great follow up over to Marvel Comics' Resurrection of Magneto miniseries. I am just loving the way that Al Ewing is constructing all these just really hellish scenarios for Max as Magneto attempts to bring himself back from the underworld of the Marvel Comics universe. I think the camaraderie and some of the character interactions that Al Ewing was able to script across that issue between Magneto and Storm was so excellent. Luciano Vecchio's incredible page designs put so much additional intrigue within the scope of the issue. I think Al Ewing just perfectly did a really great job punctuating on all the interesting character moments and just this really great position that Max seemingly left off on over on Krakoa, especially as towards some of those final issues of X-Men Red, really bringing in the beginning of Judgment Day. It really seemed like Max had lost his will to live. So there was so much great characterization for Magneto specifically over in Resurrection of Magneto 2. Cannot encourage you to check it out enough. We also had Amazing Spider-Man 44. I think the Gang War has just been a excellent, a phenomenal storyline for the Amazing Spider-Man. Really, this one is all focused over on Peter Parker's supporting cast with characters like Jenny Slinkin, Madame Mask, and Tombstone himself. Surprisingly, Jenny Slinkin doesn't even show up in the final issue of the Amazing Spider-Man's Gang War storyline, but I still think there's just so much incredible pathos over across the scope of that issue too. That one has a really fantastic script from Zeb Wells that's really focused on fleshing out Spider-Man across the Marvel universe in so many different contexts. I also really love the way that Zeb Wells was able to check in on Peter's relationship with Randy in the scope of the issue, so they really accurately motivated him when the gang war kicked off over in earnest. Also, at the very, very beginning of the week, we had the chance to check in on the latest issue of DC Comics Flash series. That one has been just so phenomenal. Every single issue has just melted my brain in half with the amount of plot threads and the mysterious characters and villains lingering across that tale. Just one of the things that really sets me back sometimes when I'm reading that Flash series is just the fact that Cy Spurrier doesn't reference each plot thread in each individual issue. I am really biting my nails waiting for the reappearance of the Pilgrim character who showed up towards that issue with Jai. I don't even think we got an appearance from that character in the sixth issue of the core series, but man, there was such great characterization between the entire Flash family and some of those DC villains. Also, I think we talked about this on our last stream too, but my goodness, Cy Spurrier, you're so wonderful at writing Linda as a character. I don't think any other writer has been able to tap into her mental and emotional issues on the way that he has. That book is just wonderful. My name is Arakko Braddock, and I want to officially welcome you to our stream today. We have so many exciting news stories to go ahead and cover. We are really going to be taking a step back here in previewing a lot of the new Marvel and DC comics that are set to be published across really the next week here. We have really exciting new issues of Birds of Prey, X-Men, Avengers, Venom. These are all comics that I think are some of the best in Marvel and DC's publishing line. So great to talk about them with you today. Also, we're going to take a look at what Kieran Gillen's post X-Men plans are. So really bittersweet, but I'm also excited to see what new project he's taken on. Also, we have a couple teases at what's next for X-Men From the Ashes. That's the next upcoming reboot following Krakoa. I cannot believe we are only a couple weeks, really only a couple months away from the X-Men From the Ashes reboot, which is coming here over in July. Want to take a big step back here as well and give a big shout out over to Afro SF, who's over on our stream today. Afro SF says, "Greetings, Arakko Braddock. Always great to catch you live. Less than a week to go until Ultimate X-Men #1. Yay, Peach Momoko." Can you believe it? Can you believe it? We've almost seen the launch of every single Ultimate Comics series now. We've been hyping up the new Ultimate Comics line for such a long time over at Marvel. It's just so interesting to sit here for like, north of 6 months to hype up the entire line and then to see these launches finally happen over in real time. I cannot wait for Ultimate X-Men issue 1. We're going to be taking a look at the preview a lot later on over in our stream today, but we're going to go ahead and kick things off today with one of my very, very favorite DC comics. The publisher is currently releasing. This one too just features some really wonderful artwork from a DC artist who's a little bit, I would say, underrated at the publisher, and that would be Javier Pina. Without further ado here, let's go ahead and take a look at the phenomenal new issue of Birds of Prey coming in directly from DC Comics. This series and comic book has just been so phenomenal with the way it's remixed all these fascinating DC Comics characters and the way it's sort of divided and structured the issue. Plus this book has just a phenomenal creative team with regular series writer Kelly Thompson and the regular series artist of Leonardo Romero. One thing I like about the book is even though Birds of Prey 7 is changing hands with a different artist, this issue actually features colors from the really consistent series colorist Jordie Bellaire, who's really known just across the comics books industry for so much incredible color work across so many different tales, as well as some writing as well. Also, this series of Birds of Prey is shifting gears a lot. We just got out of the massive Megadeth story arc, where our characters, spearheaded by Dinah the Black Canary, were trying to rescue Sin from the island of Themyscira. Thankfully, our birds were finally able to bring back Sin, even though there's a couple more consequences, and now they learn that there's like a mysterious assassin targeting them. So without further ado, let's see if our birds can find a little bit more about the mysterious killer who seems to be targeting them in the latest issue of their new series, opening up a brand new plot thread. Or excuse me, story arc is what I meant to say there. By the way, this one is on Adventures in Poor Taste. Let's go ahead and check in with the solicit. New mission, new team. Sin is alive and back with Black Canary in Gotham. And the world didn't get destroyed. But the cost was high, and nobody's exactly sure what it means yet. Shocking revelations in the wake of the Birds' first mission leads Dinah to a conspiracy theory against the Birds of Prey and a whole new mission. New mission, new team, hold on to your butts. All right, once again here, Birds of Prey issue 7, still written by Kelly Thompson, featuring artwork from Javier Pina. We have colors from Jordie Bellaire, and it looks like the letters in the series are still coming in from Clayton Cowles. Also, the cover on this one still illustrated over from Leonardo Romero and Jordie Bellaire. Okay, so this issue opens on a really fascinating note. I'm also really loving the page layouts from Javier Pina. Our team is really coming together and trying to find a little bit more clues about the mysterious killer who seems to be targeting several of the birds. Also, I just love some of the expressions of the characters that Pina is able to render on the page. Plus, this is opening a new arc of the series here, and the credits page from DC is placed on just a really interesting note as well. Another aspect of this that's really fascinating is the fact that Meridian is referenced by Barbara on this page. It really feels like Meridian's presence across the DC universe has been bolstered thanks to this Birds of Prey storyline. It's so cool to have, this character of Map, Sir Meridian from Gotham Academy joining the main series here. And together we also get a couple clues about the fact that Meridian's power has to do with the green in the DC Comics universe. This is so fascinating to me because the green is one of those aspects held within the Swamp Thing franchise. Also, I do want to take a couple moments and highlight just how great some of the individual character acting is from Pina on the page. Meridian is using technology kind of similar to like Marvel Comics Iron Man franchise. We also have Barbara Gordon on the next panel speaking with Dinah, who are both carrying such interesting expressions. It really looks like this is an issue just loaded with juxtaposition. So the fact that there's so much interesting facial expressions and like secondary activity for the characters does a great job keeping this book fluid and interesting, even though Birds of Prey is really devoted to setting up the next storyline here. Also, this page is illustrated just so incredibly well. The visual motif of Oracle and the sort of like clock tower effect is so interesting, especially when it's paired the status quo within our new Birds of Prey characters. Once again, here, super interesting page directly referencing Meridian's connections to the green as well as some time travel here too. And then in our final page of this comic book preview, we actually learn that the mysterious assassin also has connections over to the red within the DC universe. So I'm really wondering if this villain, this mysterious assassin who's targeting the birds, has any relation to maybe the Animal Man franchise. I'm kind of wondering if we're going to get any connections with Dr. Jason Woodrue or anything to that effect referenced in a future issue of Birds of Prey. I'm such a big fan of this comic book over at DC, and I think Javier Pina is just a wonderful addition to Leonardo Romero. We previously got some art featured from a different artist whose name is escaping me right now over the course of Birds of Prey, but I really just think Javier Pina is such a natural fit. I'm so excited to check out this brand new arc of the series too. I feel like the Megadeth story went really long in terms of Birds of Prey, so really interested in seeing if Kelly Thompson is able to manage some more smaller storylines here. Also, I've seen Vixen teased in some future issues. I wonder if she's going to be referenced maybe with some of her connections to the animal characters within the scope of DC Comics or her connection to the Red. So we're going to have a full review over on Birds of Prey this Wednesday when the series releases over at DC Comics. And now we're going to go ahead and move directly into some of our Marvel Comics coverage and actually cover the latest issue of Marvel Comics' main X-Men title. So in the last issue of X-Men, our team of characters were really fighting Nimrod and the rest of Orchis. This issue really looks to pick up on that and flesh out magic specifically over in the X-Men universe. In this issue, we're really going to get to see a chance to see Magic strike back against Orchis after the disastrous blow that the anti-mutant group struck during the Hellfire Gala. Also, one really interesting thing to note about the X-Men franchise is this series is set to really end very soon at the publisher. In fact, Marvel recently teased that the last issue of X-Men, the core X-Men series, is set to release over in June. So without further ado, let's go ahead and check in on the 32nd issue of the series that's seemingly teasing an appearance from both Shadowcat as well as Magic and Lockheed. So X-Men 32, Besties with Bloody Blades. Kate Pryde and Illyana Rasputin have been best friends for a long time. They've had good times, they've had bad times. One thing they can always agree on, stopping anti-mutant bigots' heads. Once again here, this one written by Jerry Duggan, featuring art by Phil Noto, and we have a cover for the main series by Joshua Cassara and Marte Gracia. Really loving so many of the wondrous facial expressions for Marte Gracia's covers, and there's always something about the symmetry or the layout that always really captures my interest here. Also, I think Phil Noto is just so wonderful with facial expressions and just tackling so many interesting appearances and page layouts for characters. I feel like Phil Noto's art has such a big emphasis over on the negative space. So towards these first couple panels here, we can see that Magic is seemingly infiltrated this Orchis, run compound here. So it looks like Magic is really trying to infiltrate the Reverend Stryker Education Center for disadvantaged youth. We can see her come in almost through a zip line here and crash into the window, where she immediately exacts some of her vengeance across these Orchis characters. This issue is also kind of hitting me in a way that's very similar to Kitty's recent resurgence against so many of those Orchis agents towards the end of the Hellfire Gala as well within the scope of the Marvel Universe. There's so many great action shots with Magic here. The way that her sword is deflecting this gunshot over from an Orchis agent is so fascinating here. And once again, there's really strong panel bleeds with Magic kind of throwing her soul sword, as well as just really enjoying some of the violence that she's seemingly inflicting over on some of these Orchis agents. Once again, this is a really violent preview of an upcoming X-Men series. It really feels like the X Men are cut off from so many of their resources during the Fall of X era over at Marvel Comics. And I'm just really happy to see that in so many issues of X Men, Jerry Duggan just continues to jump in on different characters or different scenarios across Fall of X to create so many just interesting new ways to explore this fascinating X Men storyline. I am really excited to check in over with Kate Pryde and Ilyana Rasputin, I believe this Wednesday when Marvel Comics' latest X Men issue is published here. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the brand new Kamala Khan comic book. This one is Miss Marvel, The Mutant Menace. For me, this one is so exciting because it feels like we're getting a really strong sense of progression over from Miss Marvel. In a recent miniseries, we really got to see Kamala Khan strike back against Orcus during like a summer program over at Empire State University. I thought that was a great series that did a wonderful job establishing Kamala Khan as a villain. Also, kind of seeing Kamala really draw a target on her back and really get in the crosshairs of like characters like Omega Sentinel was so fascinating. I am also really thrilled to see that this Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace series, is also going to throw the character of Mojo into the mix with the series. There's so many exciting things happening in this upcoming Miss Marvel Mutant Menace series. Let's go ahead and check this one out right now. Of course, this article is coming in over from Adventures in Poor Taste, Marvel Preview, Miss Marvel, Mutant Menace, Issue 1. Hated and feared. Miss Marvel has officially come out to the world as a mutant and a member of the X-Men. And she's about to learn how hard things can get for mutant kind. Kamala Khan is used to being a hometown hero. There's no way her community could turn on her just because she's a mutant. Right? Right? The writers of the hit Miss Marvel, the New Mutant miniseries, including the MCU's own Kamala Khan, Iman Vellani, returned to chronicle Miss Marvel's next steps into exploring her mutant identity. So I think one thing about Miss Marvel Mutant Menace that's so exciting is the fact that just so many members of this creative team are returning from the main or from the first Miss Marvel series. Once again, here we have Sabra Perzana coming back alongside the Miss Marvel actress herself, Iman Vellani. On art, we have Scott Godlewski and Eric Arcieniga joining the comic book. Plus, we have covers coming in from Carlos Gomez and Jesus Abertov. Plus, I think one thing about Marvel's main X-Men series is it's done a wonderful job kind of cementing Miss Marvel's status quo as an X-Men across the Marvel universe. To me, it feels like Miss Marvel has just really naturally been implemented towards the X-Men, and I'm really excited to see, how she's adapting to this really difficult status quo during the Fall of X story. Okay, let's go ahead and check in on this really interesting scene and artwork from Scott Godlewski. Really find that Scott Godlewski's page layouts and character expressions are so wonderful for the various characters across this issue here. And it really seems like in this preview for Miss Marvel Mutant Menace, Kamala is really dealing with the frayed public sentiment. Orcus has really turned just so many of the kind of characters and just public against the X-Men heroes at this point. Really watching this character argue against Kamala Khan just due to the fact that she's a mutant herself is so horrifying. Also, I really love the way that this series introduces and foreshadows the appearance of Miss Marvel. Towards the third panel on the page here, we get the silhouette of Kamala. And then on the very final panel, there's this motion of the character throwing the grenade. In the very next sequence, we can see Miss Marvel catch the grenade with both of her really large hands and kind of take the blow in earnest here and defuse it. I thought this was such an interesting use of Kamala's powers and just a great splash page over from the creative team as well. Also, as we mentioned earlier, really fascinating reveal for Kamala on the page as well within this issue. We have so many just beautiful kind of character bleeds and a really busy page littered with so much dialogue here, but I think the way that Scott Godlewski has laid this out has made this really interesting to look at. Plus, there's a really fascinating sense of perspective, and the way that the Miss Marvel logo is drawn with these kind of, public sentiments towards the X-Men featured on these posters in the background too is just really horrifying here. Plus, we also get to see more consequences from Kamala taking the grenade within the scope of her own hand, and we get to see her embiggen hand almost explode too. The final page of the issue does a wonderful job building the stakes towards this really public, this really negative public sentiment towards Marvel's mutant characters. Once again, it seems like Kamala just has so much paranoia struck about her, with all these characters talking about her in the background and noting that they're seeing the character of Miss Marvel very close to Kamala in all these instances as well here. Also, this is once again a really fascinating page layout here. The fact that there's all these disparate panels in the background with Kamala featured in the foreground is just so gorgeous. In addition to this series really having an interesting lead character and protagonist amidst a really heightened and fascinating time for the X-Men, this one also has some really fantastic artwork. So I really want to give it over to Marvel for featuring such a strong creative team on this book that's exploring a really interesting avenue of the X-Men franchise. I am also so interested with how Mojo could find his way back towards the center of this comic book series as well. Okay, so that's going to be our preview today over for Miss Marvel Mutant Menace. I am so excited about this upcoming issue here. I think it has so much potential to flesh out a really fascinating corner over at Marvel Comics. I also wanted to go ahead and explore some upcoming solicits for future issues of Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace here. We just got the opportunity to check out the first cover of the issue. I want to check out the second one right now. So it looks like Miss Marvel Mutant Menace 2 is really going to put Mojo towards the forefront of the series here. I want to go ahead and check out the solicit on this one. The infamous X-Man. Now that Kamala is very notably and very publicly an X-Man, she is attracting all sorts of attention. And you know who uses that attention as currency? That's right. It's the return of the X-Men's old media mogul mastermind, Mojo. Yes, so we also have a really fascinating appearance from Mojo just featured in the second issue of the series alone here. So interested to check out future issues of Miss Marvel to see how this future X-Men villain is really going to be spotlighted in Kamala's core series. Looks like we also have the solicit for the third issue coming in here that's pitting Kamala directly against this zombified version of Cyclops. Let's check out the solicit on this one. It's a mutant eat mutant world. Miss Marvel knew she was going to have to try to put up with a lot, but her own mutant friends turning into zombies and trying to eat her is a bridge too far. And she thought being an Avenger was hard. Yeah, so it looks like we're in for just an interesting scenario for upcoming issues of Miss Marvel, pitting Kamala directly against Scott Summers, Cyclops, in this sort of zombified version here. I'm wondering if this has any connections over to Mojo in the core Marvel universe and just what readers can expect to see next. Okay, so that is going to be the end of some of our previews over at Marvel Comics. And I'm going to take just a quick break here, and we're going to be back in just a moment to explore some of the future X-Men comic books and storylines at Marvel. I'll be right back in just a few moments. Okay, I want to welcome you back to the stream here. I also want to check in on this brand new issue of Venom that's coming out really soon over from Marvel Comics. Right now, Venom is so fascinating as an ongoing series because the book really has two main plot threads with both Eddie Brock and his son Dylan. Right now, over in the Marvel Comics universe, Eddie is trying to get back to his son Dylan. So there's just so much intrigue laden across this series. In a very recent issue of Venom, we also saw the character of Carnage spring up just out of nowhere and tell Eddie that he managed to kill his son. Plus, this is really set to feature the reappearance of the upcoming Symbiosis Necrosis storyline that's set to tie Venom and Carnage together. So, I want to go ahead and detail the first issue of the series taking place in the main Venom series. This one is going to split off from the core writer Al Ewing and really feature some writing over from Toron Grönbeck. Toron Grönbeck has really written so much of the Dylan focused material over in Marvel Comics Venom series. So let's go ahead and see how Carnage and Dylan are set to meet up and unite over in the pages of Venom issue 31. Let's go ahead and check out the solicit from Adventures in Poor Taste. New Venom Carnage crossover begins here. Carnage is back. Born anew in symbiote goo and blood, Cletus Cassidy is more dangerous and violent than ever before. And he has his sights set on the unsuspecting Venom. Untested against the might of his symbiotic sibling without his father by his side, will Dylan Brock be able to hold the sadistic serial killer at bay? Or will Carnage live up to his namesake and leave another brutalized symbiote host in its wake? One more quick thing I want to say about this Venom book that I have no doubt is going to be really important at some point within the scope of the series is the fact that there's currently a Carnage series going on where the character of Flash Thompson is trying to battle Cletus Cassidy as Carnage. Also, within the scope of the Marvel Universe right now, Flash is now the anti Venom over at Marvel. So let's go ahead and see how Dylan Brock is going to meet up with the incredibly violent Cletus Cassidy in Venom 31. By the way, I just want to quickly shout out Ken Lashley as our interior artist on this series. Ken Lashley is such an interesting artist within the scope of comics because he just has so many different styles that he's able to implement. I think this more loose style is just such a great hook over for the main Venom book, especially as it's set to introduce Cletus towards the series. Cletus has just been acting so weird within the scope of the main Carnage book. So many of his interactions with pedestrians are just these subtle, small moments before Cletus is set to just violently murder them. And this issue also strikes, so much of that same tone across the book as Cletus is seemingly stalking out his next victim. Over on the next page, we finally get to check in with Dylan, who is actually trying to get a job towards this warehouse. Dylan is trying to lie about his age so he's able to get the job and really find a way to make his own money within the course of the Marvel Universe here. The storyline gets really interesting as the issue goes, as the longer that Dylan is employed here, the more he starts to figure out that something kind of violent is going on in the background within the course of the series. Also, it seems like Dylan also has an idea here that Carnage is on the loose and really seems to be checking in and making sure that Carnage isn't closing in on his location. On the very final panel, we get just a really violent outburst towards this warehouse that Eddie or Dylan recently just started working at here. The character that Dylan was working with is violently shot. And then over in this additional warehouse space, we see this really ominous message written in blood, seemingly from Cletus, stating, "Where is Eddie?" In the final panel of the issue, we really see Dylan responding to the threat here and trying to eliminate this bomb that Cletus may have really kind of checked over within the warehouse. Also, getting to see Dylan take on his Venom suit with these really interesting chains to break him apart over from Dylan in the Venom suit is really fascinating here. Plus, the way that Dylan is able to grow his wings, kind of similar to Eddie in the final panel and escape through the window, is so brilliant. I'm really excited to check out this upcoming issue of Venom over at Marvel Comics. This one just has so many interesting plot threads and connections to the main book right now. It's so interesting, too, how Venom is kind of split between two different narratives over with Eddie and Dylan. I've actually really appreciated some of the recent writing from Al Ewing on the core Venom series and really think the plot threads that Toron Grondbeck has with Dylan are really fascinating as well. Nobody except me says I don't like Spawn Venom very much. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of some of the chains featured on this kind of more Spawn implemented version of Venom, but I do like the fact that there's some more subtle visual motif that at least separates, Dylan apart from Eddie over in the main series as well. Okay, so there was some really fascinating recent news coming in over from Marvel about the X-Men from the Ashes reboot. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one right now. The upcoming writer Gail Simone, who is set to write a brand new storyline over for the free comic book day issue of X-Men, is really set to release some brand new news about the X-Men from the Ashes teaser and feature just some upcoming new storylines here. So this one is coming in over from David Brooke on Adventures in Poor Taste. Writer Gail Simone joins X-Men CBR message boards. So for anybody not in the know, the X-Men CBR message boards really is the place to talk about so many different comics across, both Marvel and DC here. So really interesting to see Gail just kind of ominously join the message board just in time for her epic new run over on the X-Men to start here in earnest. Gail Simone, an awesome writer we've come to love over the years and likely one of the main X-Men writers in the new era kicking off in July, has joined the CBR message boards. It's not confirmed she's writing the X-Men, but she is writing the X-Men in a new free comic book story this May. In a message posted in an X-Men thread, Rogue and Kate Pryde will each lead the new teams this summer from BC. Simone said she'd like to communicate with fans on this board specifically rather than social media. To kick things off, Simone, going by Comic Scale, listed off two major points. I don't take offense at this stuff. You can do your very best and some people will still genuinely not like it. It's a bummer because you want people to feel like they got their money's worth, But it's going to happen every time, and that is okay. I wonder if I should maybe just start a thread people can post on and ask questions or whatever without interrupting the flow in threads like these. You can read the full message in the screenshot below. Just to be completely honest, I don't think we can gather that much information from Gail Simone joining the X-Men plot threads or the X-Men kind of CBR message board, but I think the idea that Rogue and Kate Pryde will be leading the new X-Men teams this summer is so interesting right now. Rogue, it felt like during the Krakoan era, didn't always have a fantastic spotlight, and I think there's so much fan interest surrounding that character due to her relationship with Gambit. So I think there's going to be a lot of fan interest with Rogue leading her own portion of the team. Kitty Pryde has had such a big emphasis towards the Krakoan era, but she's had a more bleak and a more violent outlook. I think it'd be really cool in X-Men from the Ashes if we really got to see more of a redemption arc for Kitty towards the next X-Men relaunch and really kind of see her soften up as opposed to the really hard kind of like exterior shell that she was carrying across Krakoa. Afro SF says, I remember Ken Lashley's art on Reggie Hudlin's Black Panther annual #1 in 2001. Yeah, Ken Lashley has been working in the comics industry space for such a long time here. I love his artwork. It can be so varied and detailed. It can be just really direct and visceral at certain moments, and it can be a lot more loose in other moments as well. Nobody except me says, saw this headline but missed the details. Let's find out. Great coverage as usual. Smart move to try to control the narrative before certain groups can create one before the books even drop. Social media is so toxic. Indeed, indeed. It's so interesting that Gail Simone decided to head over to, CBR, which is just a place where so many people discuss, upcoming storylines or really get into the nitty gritty of just so much X Men discourse over at the publisher. Once again, here, Gail Simone, just a wonderful writer over at DC and Marvel. In this post, she really notes that she's been absent from the big two for a little while, and she's really interested in being like featured in like a big and prominent relaunch here. I'm really excited about the fact that we are getting Gail Simone joining the X-Men roster after so many of the talent like Kieran Gillen are set to leave over at Marvel as well. I also want to spotlight one more incredible Gail Simone story before we move on here. Give me just one moment. Okay, I wanted to quickly mention that DC Comics is soon going to be dropping a Secret Six omnibus over from Gail Simone. This is probably my absolute favorite work from her in comics that I have ever read. I think so much of the team dynamics and camaraderie in this series will be kind of the blue point for her upcoming run on X Men. I am just so excited to see what connective tissue I can find between that series and this one. I think the way that Simone was able to characterize like Ragdoll, Catman, as well as like Scandal Savage, so interesting. If you want to get a hint at how Simone is probably going to be writing her X Men characters, there is no better place to find out than Gail Simone's Secret Six. She's had numerous runs on Secret Six, and as far as I'm concerned, they've all been nothing short of fantastic too. Okay, let's go ahead and see what else we have to talk about today so far here. All right, let's go ahead and continue the focus over on Marvel Comics X Men. We have been doing nothing but hyping up the brand new Ultimate X Men launch over from Marvel for such a long time here. We finally have a news article coming from David Brooke detailing the first couple pages for Ultimate X Men. We already got a teaser of a recent Ultimate X Men issue, and the fact that we have even more preview pages before the first issue is even in stores, I think is super exciting. All the pages and the script for this issue and the cover is all rendered by Peach Momoko over at Marvel Comics. Let's check out our solicit on Ultimate X Men one more time before we check in on the fascinating interior pages for the debut issue. Visionary creator Peach Momoko creates a new generation of X-Men for an all-new universe. Hisako Ichiki is a teenage girl who just wants to live a normal life, go to school, hang out with her friends, ignore the political strife broiling over after the events of Ultimate Invasion. But life has other plans for her. In Japan, urban legends have sprung to life and brought some unusual new powers with them. Meet Armor, Maystorm, and a group of new Ultimate X-Men, the likes of which you've never seen before. I am really fascinated to see this solicit reference Ultimate Invasion. I'd figure at this point we'd have read the solicit just countless times here, but the fact that I'm just continuing to find new elements of plot within the marketing material has me really excited. Also, I don't think Ultimate Spider-Man was this close or this soon to reference Ultimate Invasion and some other Ultimate Comics continuity so soon within the scope of the solicit. Also, this book is also set to take on some of those plot threads from Ultimate Black Panther with the character of Storm, especially because this May Storm hero that Hisako Armor meets really early on in the issue is inspired by the character of Storm too. So I think it's going to be just so fascinating to see these characters reunite over in a future issue of maybe Ultimate X-Men or Ultimate Black Panther. Okay, it looks like we also have a direct quote over from Peach Momoko as well from a previous X-Men Monday. Let's go ahead and read that one before we take a look at the interior pages. My Ultimate X-Men isn't directly influenced by classic X-Men stories. I like to believe CB and Jonathan Hickman chose me because they wanted something completely new and different. So, I think sometimes no influences is a good thing, especially exciting stuff when you consider this is part of the Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate Black Panther universe. Wow, so interesting to see Peach Momoko reference the other books in the Ultimate line just so soon, especially when she talks about what her influences are for the other Ultimate X-Men issues as well. Also, I think it's so interesting that she talks about her lack of influences on the main X Men title. I was really interested to see what some of the fan response would be, and it actually seemed positive. I'm really happy that hopefully Momoko is going to be able to strike off on her own influences and tell an X Men story that's a little bit more personal to her within the scope of Marvel Comics. I really love the first cover of the issue. It sets up so much intrigue within the course of the main title. There's this really fascinating character within the background of some of these pages in the main series. Plus, in this preview, we're also going to get the chance to really see Hisako manifest her armor powers. So, without further ado, let's check in on some of the interior pages from the writer and artist Peach Momoko in Ultimate X-Men issue 1. Just want to give a quick shout out that the script is adapted by Zach Davison, and the letters in this issue are tackled from VC's Travis Lanham. Also, the Ultimate Comics line has had so much fascinating design from Jay Bowen. Looks like this issue is also accommodated with his design as well. So this is one of our first interior preview pages for Ultimate X-Men. Once again, we get that dark visual motif and Hisako rendering just a really strong and expressive facial glance, or maybe just element of horror towards this character. Also, the way that Peach Momoko is able to utilize this really subtle panel bleed and just expressions in the background is so horrifying. I'm loving the influence of like Eastern manga or Junji Ito that Ultimate X-Men is seemingly carrying on within these preview pages. Over on the second page, I am loving all these really tense expressions from Hisako. Once again, her tears rendering just in the background of her face within the issue with all these disparate speed lines wonderfully builds up the tension of the main series. We also see her armor pendant also clutched within the scope of her hand as well. She's really ominously chanting, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," within the background. And she sees this mysterious face as well when she closes her eyes. Once again, Peach Momoko just such a master of pacing in terms of some of these pages in Ultimate X-Men. On the next page, we get a tease of a car showing up at Hisako's location, and this mysterious character from the first page also shooting a really strong glance stating, "Why are you running away? You're the one who told me not to run." One thing I like about this too is the fact that there is so much tone and so little dialogue. I think this does a wonderful job building up the tension within the scope of the issue as well. The facial expression that the other character is giving Hisako is almost as horrifying as Hisako's own expression within the issue as well. Also, the way that this car manages to hit her and evoke Hisako's armor powers is so fascinating. I'm loving the expressive way that Peach Momoko was able to render this sequence in so many of the facial expressions across Ultimate X-Men. I really think that this book is going to have a much different and more vibrant tone than so many other, not only Ultimate Comics, but titles within the scope of Marvel. I am so happy to see so many Eastern influences and really think that this could have a positive force over on the comic book industry. I hope that more creators are able to render character expressions with, stronger reactions and stronger, faces. I want to see more things kind of emphasized and really taken in interesting ways here. Also, I'm really fascinated too to see Maystorm reintroduced within Ultimate X-Men and to see how Hisako and Maystorm really kind of develop their relationship as this series continues. So happy too to see Momoko reference nearly every single Ultimate comic book that's been featured in the line to date so far. Really hope that we see characters from Ultimate Spider-Man and Black Panther show up as soon as possible in this series. Well, it seems like Ultimate X-Men is going to be a winner from so many of the preview pages we've seen across this series. I know we've really hyped this up for months and months and months and months. I am so excited to have a full review for this series this Wednesday over on the main channel here. Nobody except me says, I'm excited for the new launch as well. Afro SF, I wonder if Charles Xavier is alive in the Ultimate Universe. That is such a good call out, Afro SF. I really want when Marvel really features some additional X-Men characters in Ultimate X-Men. I want them to have a different tone than the main Marvel universe. I would love it if maybe like Magneto, Emma Frost, Kate Pride, if some of those characters were kind of more core or central to Marvel's Ultimate X-Men line as opposed to Professor Xavier. I really want these books to put a strong emphasis on some of the more ancillary characters within the X-Men line to make sure that Ultimate X-Men has no resemblance to Marvel's main X-Men book over at the publisher. At the very least, I really want to see the X-Men take on big genre status quo storylines that are much different from the main Ultimate X-Men series. Like, I really hope that X-Men From the Ashes features a really interesting new location that's really going to set it really strongly apart over from Ultimate X-Men as well. Okay, give me just a few moments and we'll go ahead and preview our next story. One of my absolute favorite creators over at Marvel Comics for the past couple years has been none other than Kieran Gillen. Sadly, Kieran Gillen appears to be leaving Marvel Comics as well as the X-Men, but we just got a brand new announcement on an upcoming Kieran Gillen comic with the fantastic Casper Wingard. Let's go ahead and cover Kieran Gillen's next project. This one is coming in from Gray McMillan over on the popverse.com. HBO meets the X-Men and Marvel mutant writer Kieran Gillen's new fantasy series, The Power Fantasy, with Casper Wingard. I knew the Casper Wingard name was familiar. I was trying to place it the past couple moments, and I finally figured out that Wingard delivered excellent material over on the Night Terror series from DC with Joshua Williamson. Not enough people read the main Night Terror series. I cannot recommend it to you enough. What if Watchmen had 6 Dr. Manhattans? The Power Fantasy writer Kieran Gillen. What comes after conquering time and space with the X-Men? The answer was revealed at Emerald City Comic-Con Friday morning with the announcement of the Power Fantasy by Immortal X-Men and the Wicked and Divine writer Kieran Gillen and artist Casper Wingard. So it looks like Wingard has also previously worked on All Against All. I've heard really wonderful things about that book, as well as Homesick Pilots. This one also features letters, let's see, from Gillen's long-term collaborator Clayton Cowles. I am really noticing that Clayton Cowles works on so many of my favorite comic books across the industry, period. I've been trying to think about something to do with Casper for years, Gillen told the crowd. When I was doing Young Avengers, let's see, The Wicked and Divine came from Young Avengers. What would HBO's Young Avengers be? The Power Fantasy is that for Immortal X-Men. You can stop reading Immortal X-Men and jump over to read this and see what happens next. It is as if, what if Watchmen had 6 Dr. Manhattans? Teaser text from the slides presented as the show read, the first extra-normal individuals appeared in 1945. Some describe them as having superpowers. It is easy to laugh at the naivety. We know that the term has a specific technical meaning. To be a superpower means you possess the destructive capacity of the nuclear arsenal of the United States of America. There are 6 beings with superpowers on Earth. The world's continued existence relies on them never coming into conflict. The images shown in the slide feature the core cast of the series, rendered by Casper Wingard, as well as the opening pages to the first issue. Wingard joined Gillen on the panel for the announcements. We really didn't want to do capes. We wanted to do more grounded with these characters. I wanted to visualize their powers in a weird way. They've all got their own separate skill set. They're all uniquely powered. It's fun to do that in a human element instead of just relying on a suit to do that. It's not really a superhero book, said Gillen. None of these people save the world. Before joking, well, they save the world by not using their powers. The Power Fantasy launches August 2024 from Image Comics. Okay, I think the thing about this series that has really captured my interest beyond anything referenced over in that article is just Kieran Gillen saying that this is the continuation of Immortal X-Men. It's not really because it's published by a different publisher completely, but it looks like it's going to feature so many of those same themes and elements of personality. um, I really find that when writers stray away from Marvel and DC for a little bit, it is better for the writer in a lot of these cases because they get to have these different experiences that they can hopefully bring back to the course of superhero comics. I know that for Kieran Gillen, it was just so epic when he came back to the publisher towards the end of the X-Men's Krakoan era, and I do think the time that he spent away from Marvel probably did a fantastic job fueling some of those upcoming storylines. And I just don't think you can argue with the quality of Gillen's work in the Marvel Universe. He's almost eclipsed Jonathan Hickman for me as one of my favorite writers, period, over at Marvel and just whichever publisher he ventures into. Casper Wingard, such a great artist over at not only DC Comics but Image as well. I really think there is so much potential in this brand new story, and I'm really happy to see this creative team too. Plus, Clayton Cowles, I also just renders so much of the letters on like a lot of my favorite comic books. I believe he even tackled some of the letters over on Birds of Prey too. So we're even following Clayton Cowles across publishers over during the course of comics here. Very excited about this upcoming work for Kieran Gillen. We also have some brand new news coming in on another superhero writer who's looking to kind of stray from superhero comics. It looks like we have this brand new article from Gray McMillan coming from the Popverse stating that James Tynion IV isn't interested in returning to superheroes anytime soon. The Something is Killing the Children writer is staying away from capes for the time being. So for me, this is just absolutely devastating as well. I think James Tynion has been a wonderful creator, and his run on the main Batman title from DC Comics was so wonderful. It introduced so many fascinating characters across DC Comics, and I just think it's a little bit upsetting to see him leaving the publisher so soon. I'm also really wondering if the way that DC Comics has acknowledged and treated his runs in the past have any inspiration towards the way that they've kind of treated like some of his appearances over with the main series. Okay, let's go ahead and check in on what James Tynion has to say about why he's leaving superhero comics. Good news for fans who are excited to read more of James Tynion IV's creator-owned comics. The writer and co-creator of titles like Something is Killing the Children, The Nice House on the Lake, and World Tree is promising more information on the return of those titles very soon. For fans of Tynion's work on series like Batman, Justice League Dark, and Detective Comics, however, he has slightly less good news awaiting them. Writing on social media, the founder of Tiny Onion shared, "If you're asking about when a creator-owned comic book is coming back, you're probably going to find out very soon. If you're asking about when I'm going to write another superhero book, that is not something I'm interested in right now. Sorry." Tynion has never made any secret about the fact that his heart belongs more to horror and creator-owned comics than superheroes, a fact arguably helped by him finding so much success with the latter. Tynion being driven by something else other than nostalgia allowed him to introduce characters like Ghostmaker, Peacekeeper 1, and Clown Hunter, bringing back a much-needed burst of new energy into the Batman mythology. Now that he has a new company to lead, one that involves him making an aggressive move in the comic book direct market next year to boot, in his own words, it only stands to reason that he's going to be concentrating on a narrower focus for the next few months. Okay, what he's best known for his work on DC's Batman mythos in titles including Batman, Detective Comics, The Joker. Tynion had also written a number of other superhero titles, including The Immortal Men, DC vs. Vampires, in two Marvel issues: Death of Wolverine, Logan's Legacy, and Amazing X-Men 13. Tynion hasn't written new superhero work in some time. He departed DC's Batman, his most recent superhero series, in November 2021, all of which makes his return to the genre, should it ever happen, that much more of an event. The question is, will it ever happen? There are so many lapsed comic book writers and artists who return to the industry and to superheroes at some point. I am really hoping, in a way that's similar to Kieran Gillen, James Tynion is just going to take a little bit of time off from superhero comics, really develop maybe some other ideas, some other sensibilities, and hopefully return to either DC or Marvel in the very, very near future. I'm really happy to see some of these creators pursuing other experiences, even though I selfishly wish they were both at the big two. Okay, news is a little bit light this week. I'm going to take a quick check to see if anything has happened over at Emerald City Comic Con in terms of breaking news. And if not, we will cover one of the last stories we have set to go over on our stream today. Okay, I think we already covered some of the biggest news out of Emerald City Comic Con with that brand new Kieran Gillen project. Okay, without further ado here, we're going to go ahead and spotlight this really cool article that I was able to find over from George Marston. This one is really detailing some new information about Cassandra Nova, a Deadpool and Wolverine villain coming in over from Marvel Comics. Deadpool and Wolverine is shaping up to be an X-Men centric fan fest full of all kinds of news and returning characters from the franchise, including recent confirmation that the films will feature Cassandra Nova, an enigmatic mutant whose history with the X-Men is as strange as it gets. Though Cassandra's exact plan in Deadpool 3 hasn't yet been fully detailed, the details of her comic book history are hard facts, and they could have some heavy ramifications for the plot of the film, especially assuming that she's the big villain. By the way, this one is written by George Marston over on Newsarama. So Cassandra Nova is such an interesting character within the course of the X-Men series. She's an incredibly strong mutant that really has powers like on the scale of Professor Xavier. She was introduced in such an epic storyline with the 2001 new X-Men 14 story by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. Her introduction and origin came as something of a shock to readers. So we have some actual pages from Frank Quitely as well, just featuring so many just beautiful facial expressions and a really interesting design. There are some big, weird comic book concepts at play in Cassandra's origins, but the TLDR is that she is Charles Xavier's evil psychic duplicate, known in the Marvel Universe as a Mummudrai, a term used for certain denizens of the astral plane. Essentially, Cassandra Nova was a psychic entity from the astral plane who launched onto Charles Xavier in the womb thanks to his already burgeoning psionic abilities. Unlike most Mummudrai, Cassandra's connection to Charles Xavier allowed her to leave the astral plane and form a physical body, but sensing her premise, Xavier attempted to expel her from the womb. Because of the circumstances of her unlikely birth, which left her helpless and abandoned, Cassandra Nova came to hate Charles Xavier, deciding it would be her life's goal to become strong enough to destroy him and all other mutants. After finally forming a body, Cassandra activates a hidden cache of Sentinels, which she discovered dispatching them to the island nation of Genosha, where they massacre 16 million mutants in a horrific act of genocide. Meanwhile, Cassandra herself is captured by the X-Men and taken back to Xavier's school, where she begins her own considerable psychic abilities to wreak havoc, until she was subdued and placed in psionic captivity through the combined mutant abilities of Jean Grey, Emma Frost, and Xavier herself. Cassandra goes on to escape, clashing with the X-Men several more times until Jean Grey uses her psychic abilities to show Cassandra the massive weight of suffering her actions have caused, promising to help her reform. This leads Cassandra's eventual move to the island of Krakoa, where she joins the Marauders, Krakoa's navy, under the command of Captain Kate Pryde. But Cassandra's true colors shine through once again, and the rest of the Marauders wind up stranding her 2 billion years in the past, and that's the last place she was seen. It's hard to say how much of the history might come into play in Deadpool and Wolverine, especially the really weird bits, but Cassandra Nova as being the film's villain could certainly lend itself to a story in which all of mutant kind is threatened and their history and place in the multiverse possibly rewritten. All right, this was a really cool storyline. One of the things I was kind of really curious about in that Marauder storyline is what ended up happening to Cassandra Nova, because I honestly did fall off of that series written by Steve Orlando. Really interesting to see that she ended up turning on the Marauders, and the Marauders ended up stranding her over in the past. I am delighted to see her show up in the X-Men From the Ashes reboot. I hope she has like a much bigger presence in the next reboot of X-Men as well. All right, well, I'm going to be honest. It is just a much lighter week of comics news over at DC and Marvel. I think this is actually going to be the end of our stream today. There is not enough news to carry a full stream tomorrow. We will be back Tuesday for a full review over at DC Comics Birds of Prey. Plus, we'll be back on Wednesday with the full review of Ultimate X-Men. And I think we'll be taking a look either at X-Men 32 or Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace. AfroSF says, Cassandra Nova is my favorite Marvel Comics retcon, and I hate most retcons. I agree. I think just as the X-Men have gone by in all these years, that Cassandra Nova has remained one of these really interesting X-Men antagonists. And frankly, I don't believe the Krakoan era really served her well enough. So I'm hoping that we'll have some big, really bombastic and epic Cassandra Nova storyline very, very soon. I want to thank you so much for coming to check out our stream today. We'll be back next week, hopefully with a longer stream and over on Tuesday and Wednesday for some brand new reviews. Thank you so much for coming to hang out today, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.